Altered Carbon, Episode 1. Okay, a little bit of background on what this is. It's set about 300 years into the future, and the main premise of what's going on is the fact that certainly the upper class, or the rich, to an extent, live forever. And they do this by having these devices that go sort of into the back of the spine here, called stacks. And that keeps all your memory and everything, and you can pass it on to different sleeves, as they call them, which is the bodies that they embrace. Which I'm not, maybe I missed it, I'm not 100% sure if these are human bodies that are bred or some sort of clone or something like that. I think certain characters seem to possibly have the same look and everything, so that would suggest that maybe it's a clone. I'm not too sure, I might have missed a bit of that, or there might be more for that to develop and we find it's much more sinister, because it seems to me that the class system in this future world has a real significant impact, because the rich call all the shots. It seems to be that they more or less govern things. And in this case, one of the people that seems to have most influence and as main focus of the probably the whole series by the looks of things is a guy called Bancroft, who I'll discuss a little bit later in the review. So our main character is Takeshi Kovacs, and this guy seems pretty interesting actually. What we do is throughout the episode, especially the sort of the first half of it, we see sort of scenes from in the past, future to us, but the past for this series, and then him in the future. And basically he was a sort of, I think, kind of a freedom fighter terrorist that certainly seems to basically have been against these sort of corporations and rich, powerful people taking sort of all the power and possession. So he sort of fought against them from what I could kind of gather. And that obviously that didn't really work out, because as we can tell in the future, the rich and the powerful are the ones that seem to be holding all the influence. So he's clearly lost that, and we actually sort of see that play out. I mean, I won't give any sort of too major spoilers, but we see it sort of play out, and in essence he gets detained. And this detention system seems to be that your memories just sort of get put into a kind of a prison cell rather than anything. I mean, not necessarily a cell, but I don't know, a computer or however it is. And then after you've served your time, you then come back out and get put into a new body. And that's what happens with Takeshi, and he gets put into this new body. Now, Takeshi originally, as you can probably tell by his name, was an Oriental guy. He's now a different person. He's still the same character, but he's in a different body. He's in one of these new sleeves. And from what we later on find out, this particular sleeve has certain upgrades and stuff that makes him have sort of kind of military skills to an extent, and certain muscle reflex reactions and things like that, which makes him super hard. He was already clearly a hard guy 250 years before. 250 years later, it looks like he's even harder. And as we later find out, he's been brought back to the future by this Bancroft guy. And what Bancroft basically wants from him, and sort of obviously I think sets the sort of the path for the entire series, is to find out who killed him, because Bancroft has been killed or maybe committed suicide or something along those lines. But he's still alive because he's got a sort of memory backup or something, and he managed to come back as himself again through these sleeves and stacks that I discussed before. But he's hired Takeshi to find out how or why he died and what's going on, because as far as we can tell, there's only really two suspects, Bancroft himself and his wife. They're the only two people who have access to this particular weapon that in theory would have actually killed him, but it didn't actually work. It was a bit of they kind of messed it up a little bit basically. So that's the sort of the premise of where it seems the series is going, and certainly this particular episode. We got introduced to a few other characters. Lieutenant Ortega, who seems to have a particular interest in Takeshi, and Bancroft actually for that matter. I think she was looking into the case that Takeshi is now dealing with beforehand, but she's also not too thrilled about the fact that this former terrorist in essence has been brought back and given a sort of superhuman body to start roaming around the streets. I'm not sure how regularly this goes on, but it seems to be, again, because the Bancroft is so rich and powerful, he can basically do what he likes. So he's hired someone that he thinks is going to be pretty good at this, and I think he seems to feel like he's got a few strings he can pull on Takeshi. At the moment, it didn't really seem too much like that. There was a book or a diary or something that seemed to have some significance, and he's offered him freedom and lots of money, and a great future, which obviously is quite desirable. But as we see as the episode goes on, Takeshi's not too sure if he really wants to do that. He does actually have some sort of principles and morals, and he's not sure if he really wants to go against that. Now, going beyond that, I did find that this episode kind of could be sort of split into two. There was the bit where we sort of found out the whole kind of rough background of how everything works, what sort of universe we're in, and sort of the key characters. And then there was the next bit where we got to see sort of Takeshi in his new body go around the city and stuff. And this is where a few bits got a little bit, for me, CGI wise, for most of the scenery and stuff that's going on, it was all pretty bloody good. There was one bit where there was a sort of maybe apartments or something in the background. Looked a little bit strange. He was just sitting on the bank by a sort of river or something. That for me looked a little bit sketchy, to be honest. I'm being really picky here, but the other bits are certainly the sort of the cities and the skyscrapers and stuff look spot on. In terms of the submersion, when we were looking more deeper, he seemed to be going through sort of red light district for quite a sort of period, and he got sort of high on a whole load of drugs and stuff like that, and it was sort of quite interesting seeing that play out. But as with someone I was actually watching this with pointed out, quite a lot of this scene, he was having a conversation with Ortega and also with this sort of manager or sort of hologram at this sort of brothel hotel place. There was basically, and she sort of summed up this sort of 10 minutes, and I think this is fair to say, to be honest, it was just basically mumbling and boobs. There was a lot of mumbling from most of the characters talking, and a hell of a lot of topless women all over the place. Now, I'm not particularly bothered by that, but at the same time, if you're sort of trying to appeal to a female audience and a male audience, it did seem to be a little bit overkill, to be honest. Once she sort of mentioned that, I thought, do you know what, you have got a good point. This does seem a bit much. And this whole sort of second half of the episode, I enjoyed it. It all looked good and everything, not just because of boobs, but the sort of the general CGI and things like that looked pretty good. And we have this sort of shootout towards the end. The action and everything involved was really good, but at the same time, it was all kind of what seemed to be a nonsense excuse just to show that our new character has got some moves. It didn't feel quite as tight and as well story written, and the way the whole thing was progressing up to that point, I had to say it didn't lose me, but it did make me think, okay, I'm not quite so sure where we're going with this. How good a quality is this? I mean, I'm being harsh, I'm being picky, but that scene was entertaining, but you did have to switch your brain off a little bit. And before that, I thought I was having, you had your brain switched on, learning all the different things that was going on. It was quite interesting. It became much more dulled down as the episode went on. That all said, I'm pleased to see this on here. It's another what seems to be pretty good, well-budgeted Netflix series. It reminded me a little bit of The Expanse in the way certain bits of it looked, and I really, really enjoyed The Expanse. It's got that sort of crime detective bit in there, which The Expanse had in certain elements of it. And again, that sort of seems to be there. It also sort of touched on Demolition Man. Certainly, it was reminding me of that a fair bit as well. All in all, though, it looked good. Generally speaking, pretty well scripted. Like I say, I did think in the second half, it did sort of go a little bit off track and became a little bit more like, okay, let's just sort of tick some boxes just to make people watch it. Let's get some violence in. Let's get some more shooting in. And we already had a really good shootout scene earlier on in the episode, to be honest. So it wasn't essential that had to be done. And some sort of kind of pointless violence. That said, it was pointless violent, but it was well choreographed. It looked really good. Everything worked really tightly. So it did sort of show that going forward, when we do have some action scenes and stuff, it's going to be entertaining to watch. And that is, good to know, because there's certain other things. For example, I was reviewing Star Trek the other day. There was a little sort of fight scene the other week. That was a bit wooden to watch and a little bit painful. Never did I feel that during these action scenes, even if I did feel they were maybe a little bit unwarranted. So in conclusion, it's looking pretty good. I've moaned a little bit, and I'm just being harsh. I'm just being critical, to be honest. It is a bit over the top, and there are reasons why we had this fight scene and stuff towards the end. There are bits to lead on to, I hope, from some of the people that came and stuff, but it did seem a little bit unnecessary in my opinion. All that said, sort of summing up the episode as a whole, it looked good. Most of it was well scripted. Generally speaking, the acting was pretty good. The action was really good. The sounds were good. Everything was there for this to be a good series. And so for that reason, I will be giving episode 1 of Altered Carbon a 7 out of 10.